anyone objects, if anyone objects, just turn your screen off and that'll be just fine. And then you can still be a part of this. Okay, now I'm going to read Sergeant Brian Masters' bio. Sergeant Brian Masters began his career in law enforcement at the age of 20, working as a correctional officer and dispatcher at the Mercer County Sheriff's Office while attending Black Hawk Community College. After that, he transferred to Western Illinois University. He has been employed by the Aledo Police Department, the Decatur Police Department, and most recently, the Illinois State Police. Some of his career accomplishments include being selected to become a member of the Special Enforcement Team and receiving recognition from IDOT for his substantial contributions to highway traffic safety for his DUI enforcement. Sergeant Masters has received numerous awards for the criminal cases that he's worked on, including child sex crimes and death investigations. He participated in the 2012 NATO Summit detail, as well as taking part in the 57th inauguration of the President of the United States. Sergeant Masters solved a cold case homicide from 1974 by identifying the killer, thus providing closure for the victim's family as well as her 3 surviving sisters after concluding over 100 interviews. Sergeant Masters received many more notable accomplishments over the years, far too many to list here. But in 2023, Sergeant Masters was appointed statewide coordinator for crisis intervention training, which we call CIT for short, for the Illinois State Police. He currently coordinates all CIT classes for new cadets in the ISP Academy and for all sworn officers within the ISP throughout the state. In this capacity, he works with several outside agencies, most notably the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, in an effort to provide the best mental health awareness and response training possible to all sworn ISP personnel. Please welcome him. At this time, we are going to discuss the Premise Alert Program. The Illinois Premise Alert Program is a safety program that allows individuals with special needs or disabilities to provide information to the police, fire, and EMS personnel, helping them better respond to emergencies at the individual's residence or workplace. Sergeant Masters, is that a good explanation of what the program is?
Yes, Jeanette, it is. And thank you very much for the invite and the welcome. I appreciate it. Make note that Jeanette has been an instrumental part of our training, and we're very thankful for her and what she's done, as well as NAMI and the organization. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning or afternoon.
Thank you. Question number 1, what is the purpose of a Premise Alert Program?
So when the legislators enacted this particular law, the focus was to be able to provide assistance for those that were in special need, requiring that assistance. And that's kind of a broad, term when they define the disabilities and or special needs. It's not just, physical, or it's not just mental. It's kind of a combination. It goes on to say that they've got to have chronic physical, developmental, behavioral, or emotional condition that would require health and related services of a type beyond that required by just a normal individual. So it's kind of expansive in their terminology, and the entries can be vast, which is kind of nice, a lot of diverse entries, but it really allows for responders to make the best connection, having that notice and preparation in place beforehand.
Question number two, how does a premise alert program help first responders when they arrive at the scene?
So our dispatchers on a general call, the telecommunicator that dispatches your city police or your county sheriff's office personnel or the Illinois State Police, um, they're trained to ask specific questions to help. But this program, in and of itself, goes a little bit beyond that. So once a person or a party is entered into this confidential database, that information is crucial, and it's the worded in the law that it shall be provided to the responding officers. So we can touch base a little bit now or in the future here on kind of what information all that entails, but essentially it allows that officer or that paramedic or that fireman, any personnel responding to the scene to know that there's an individual there with special needs. And most notably, it also highlights the the recommendations for that person as far as de-escalation techniques. You can share certain things that actually are proven to work, whether it's encouraging breathing techniques, or whether that be getting a hold of a particular relative, whomever that might be, to provide comfort. We'll have that information available to us. And there's, like I say, a list, and I can go over some of those, but an array of things that we can prepare ourselves for going into it, as well as, we would know the diagnoses, we would know the triggers, we would know what works for de-escalation, we would know, whether there's in certain areas we have therapy dogs that we can bring in and different things like that. So a lot of things that would help us prepare and have a better interaction and end result.
You kind of touched on the third question. What types of information can be included in a premise alert system?
Yeah, so quite a few. We would like to know kind of the triggers that might be of concern, so we can avoid those. We would like to know kind of things that are positive, or our hooks that we can kind of relate to them and provide them with some comfort. Strategies, those positive intervention techniques. Again, it might be a particular person or their favorite place or subject matter, different things so we can know to develop rapport or trust with that individual to aid us. It might be something, and obviously we're trying to be aware and cognizant for maintaining a safe distance for ourselves and them, but we certainly don't want to invade on their space if they're very territorial or very um, heightened sense when it comes to, getting that somebody so close to them. We don't want to invade that. Habits of the special needs, kind of what to expect if they're, for instance, unfortunately, we've all seen videos where particular officer may not have an understanding of what stimming is for somebody with autism. So we, that nervous energy, if we see that type of thing, or that pacing, or that type of thing, we'll note that in there that that is a normal behavior associated with that diagnosis, and not something that is on itself going to be perceived, hopefully not perceived as threatening in that manner to the officer. He's at least aware and can digest that in a response. I think it would also allow our dispatch and or officers hearing that call to ensure, if one is working, to get a CIT certified officer to that particular call.
Thank you. How do individuals or families register for a premise alert program?
Yeah, so I realize some folks, obviously in the state and maybe even on this call, reside in areas of rural nature, rural settings. So your particular city that you reside in may not actually be the dispatch center, but that is going to be somewhere in the county. So usually the county seed is responsible for that. But you should and could be able to go to your local police department and or fire department. Now, a lot of the major, when I say major, your bigger police departments and fire departments should have these forms on file and have knowledge. And I can't guarantee that there wouldn't be a small department somewhere that may need some guidance or to refer to the county to get them on board. But it should be available by that dispatching center. And you can just Google, and there's usually forms online. They'll let you actually enroll that way through fax or email or in person. I mean, obviously, this is, personal information. So if you feel better delivering it in person or through a secure means of fax, then that's certainly, able to be done. But that is actually good for 2 years by law when that's entered into the system. But a lot of departments will actually update that yearly or annually because we certainly want to know if there's changes, as well.
You actually answered my next question, which was how often should the premise alert information be updated? And you already, thank you for that answer. Are there any privacy concerns when sharing personal or medical information through a premise alert program?
Yeah, so that's definitely a great question, Jeanette, because that would certainly be a concern of mine if I had to enter myself or a family member into this, which is doable. So you can enter yourself, a family member, a friend, or caregiver, or medical person familiar with that particular individual is able to provide this information confidentially. Um, so once that information is gathered as part of this program, it's strictly confidential. The information is only to provide assistance to emergency personnel, medical and police responders, and no public safety worker is able to violate that confidentiality clause. Um, we realize that the citizens have those privacy rights, and any violation of that is major. Obviously, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, civil rights, different liabilities would all have major problems if this were to be violated. So we take it very seriously, and it is confidential in our database, which is not accessible to the public.
Thank you. How can first responders access the premise alert information in an emergency?
Yeah, so the dispatchers, once they receive that notice at a particular address or individual, however they're connecting that association, that information will show up and they're required to disseminate that information to the responding personnel, fire, EMS, and police. So they'll actually receive that. Um, but if it's a smaller jurisdiction or there's perhaps frequent calls for service or interaction, we would like to think that that information would be reviewed, by that police department to have all of their officers aware in preparation to best respond and connect that individual with the best treatment options for them specifically.
All right. What types of situations would most benefit from a premise alert program?
So I can definitely think of uh, when officers, whether they're um, new or maybe they just don't have experience with dealing with somebody in a mental health crisis or an individual who has a diagnosis of a developmental or mental health condition. They may, not understand, just something as simple as what an individual with autism might be saying, or maybe they're raising their voice, they're shouting, raising their arms, or pacing back and forth. They may perceive that as aggressive. They may perceive that nature as threatening. That verbal shouting might be a concern of theirs. So we want to educate our officers, and through our program, we're able to provide some of that training to them. But I could definitely see that being an advantage if the individual knew that this person would do those behaviors, or even somebody with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, or perhaps that engages in psychosis. We would want to know that, and I think it would be very important for our officers to understand that that's very real to that person, and not to go in there and say, you're not seeing that, stop, or arguing or whatever, or perhaps the alternative and just buying into that and using trickery and, oh yeah, you're right, and obviously hindering later on the treatment, and when they go to the doctor and the ER and say, oh well, I'm not the only one that sees that monkey on my shoulder. The police officer said he saw it too. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to be on the other side of that. We want to make sure we're letting them know we believe they see it, but letting them know that we personally don't, but we want to get them help. And so under that premise, I think it would be great. I also think it would be good for paramedics, first responders to know because unfortunately, there are some jurisdictions out there that don't receive a lot of mental health training, EMS, fire, and police. And we require 40 hours for our officers. They get it in the academy. And if they didn't get it in the academy, as of a couple years ago, we started going out and we're still finishing up with a couple thousand sworn officers providing it in the field. But we believe it's important. We believe it's necessary. But I believe the firemen would want to know, is this individual in a wheelchair? Is this paramedic may know, do we need to, have some sort of, barriers, in place to protect this party or any sort of, things that would be like an oxygen tank that would be flammable, any number of different things that can be provided. I think there's a lot of benefit to it.
Thank you. I saw a raised hand from Mr. Warren Boykin. Warren, did you have a question?
Actually, the question came from one of our viewers or participants in the meeting, and that was, can we ask questions as well? I just wanted to let people know that they can put questions into the chat, and we can pass those questions along.
Thank you.
Okay, and I do have some questions that I will be putting in. I'll pass along to you, Jeanette, as we go ahead. I know you have some things that you wanted to ask first, and then we will get to everybody else's questions afterwards. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right. Sergeant Masters, what is the role of law enforcement in administering and maintaining the premise alert program?
So, our role is to ensure, number one, that this is confidential and that it is only used for this specific purpose, not to violate anybody's rights at all. And keep in mind when you do submit that form, and each department may have a city or county attorney that looks over that form and authorizes its release for the public to fill it out. But you don't have to. List everything if you didn't want, a particular, medical condition, that had nothing really to do with your mental or physical illness, that it was just something private. You don't have to disclose that. It's just what you feel comfortable or feel would be most beneficial. But we want to maintain those records in a confidential way. We want to make sure that our telecommunicators and officers know this information is available, that it is coming on dispatch for particular addresses and individuals that they would encounter or respond to calls for service to, and make sure that they're aware of that, which I believe in and of itself would cause the majority of officers or responders to familiarize themselves with, mannerisms and techniques. We've all seen worst case scenarios where that authoritative or egotistic or just poor performance would escalate a situation, and we obviously encourage de-escalation. So the techniques that we're reading on these forms would hopefully enhance our training as well.
All right. How are premise alert programs funded or supported by local government agencies?
So, like anything else in our state, it is definitely a concern when it comes to funding. And I will say that the particular law itself actually does address that at the end. And by the way, this is, I believe the mental health law is in the 400s for the Illinois law compilations. So this is like 430, chapter 430. I think 405 has the mental health. But long story short, it basically says for the duration of the program, the establishment and continued existence of the premise alert program is just to be based on funding availability. So even though this was enacted years ago, it's still in place. If you look online, you'll see numerous police departments. If you Google Premise Alert Program Illinois, you'll see a lot of different agencies pop up. And then if you go to their website, it'll take you directly to that form you can fill out. And so the short answer is it is funding based, but the nice part about it is, yeah, it can be, time consuming and maybe tedious, but it's not like they're getting 600 at once. You might be getting these periodically or sporadically. So yes, there's manpower, there's time consuming, there's, a lot of that, but it's spaced out. So I wouldn't think, and that's just my personal opinion, I wouldn't think there's a ton of funds that have to be utilized here. Obviously, education in and of itself and announcing this is important, but it is funding based like anything else in Illinois.
All right. I have one more question about the premise alert program before we shift gears, and then I have a question from one of our viewers. Question number 12. What steps should be taken to ensure a premise alert program is effective and reliable?
Yeah, so if somebody were to just walk up to us and say, "Hey, my neighbor over here is, wacko, and we just want you to be aware that we think they're dangerous and everything else." I mean, that could be pretty dangerous if we just took note of that and shared that information with our officers and our dispatch without validating any of that or without substantiating any of that or following up. So. We don't just take a random stranger's word. Again, it's got to be somebody with intimate knowledge, such as that family member or caregiver, close friend, or that individual themselves. And we prefer that actually be in writing. Um, and there's a signature on file. Again, we would retain that for 2 years. But some departments have been proactive in trying to renew that annually just because people do move. Unfortunately, people pass away, and various other factors that might cause that to be a need. So I think it is important that are definitely entering factual information, verified information, substantial, steps are taken to put reliability on that, so we're not providing false information or heightening an officer's level of awareness to the point where they're becoming nervous or perhaps scared. Certainly not what we want. And I would almost think that I can't, again, this is hopeful, but you would hope that especially smaller jurisdictions would pay a visit to the home. Again, I know their call volume would dictate this, their policies and procedures, but it would be nice if they would proactively engage or introduce themselves and maybe stop by and say, hey, Joe, I see you've got this on file, and is this pretty accurate information? Is there anything else I should know? And if they see that familiar face, it might help if something were to happen in an emergency later on. So those are just some of the things that I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, thank you for that answer. And now we're going to take a question from the chat. Leah Morris wants to know, I work with Rosecrans in the living room. Will this become open for even for the local police? Will this possibly include teams like CCRT?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, especially because of the the Community Emergency Services. I get all of that terminology mixed up, but that act that was recently passed over the last couple of years, Governor Pritzker. Um, because of the responses that we're now seeing, and we want to kind of determine through a vetting process, is this going to be a mental health call in nature? Is this going to be a police response only in nature, or shall we have a combination with delay on the mental health so we can secure the scene, or is law enforcement not needed at all? So this is extremely important. That's why we try to work as a partnership. Um, the local agencies do, in fact, have this, city and county, and as a state police agency, I've had communication with our command recently. Um, we're working, and again, it's not going to happen overnight, but we're working diligently with IT personnel to kind of share this information so let's say Joe resides in Mercer County, Illinois, but is traveling to East St. Louis, for the weekend. Is there a way where we can communicate if need be through that individual through another police department? So all of those things are being looked at. Um, and I would certainly think that, say, the living room setting, if that the hours are, let's just say the busiest times are, from noon to 8 in a particular jurisdiction. So those folks are coming in during those time periods. Um, that we could at least communicate proactively, meet with the personnel and crisis response teams that are working in those areas, establish, what it is that we need to get from them, or if there's forms that we can hand to them so they can have on easy access to hand to clients or to facilitate and or help with that. That would be a great benefit, I believe.
Thank you so much for all of those answers thus far. Now we're going to switch topics and we're going to talk about the Crisis Intervention Team, or CIT. And we're going to talk about the officer training that you do. What is the primary goal of the CIT training for officers?
Yeah, so one of the number one things I wanted to say is as I come into uh, 20 years with the Illinois State Police and 23 years in this profession, I have to be honest with you, having done a lot of things and a lot of things not pleasant, as you heard, the child sex and death investigations, but um, it was certainly nice to come out of that and enter a world where you've got nice people like yourself that I've been able to meet. And I have to say, a lot of and the community that I've been able to meet, this really tops a lot of those awards and everything else that I've had in my career. Just the reward and satisfaction that I get from participating and educating and helping our officers perhaps avoid having to use deadly force or any use of force unnecessarily, or harming somebody unnecessarily, or getting an individual ignored when they really are asking for help through their actions or their words. So I think it's extremely important that we are teaching our officers that there's a profound distinction between somebody at a bar intoxicated with alcohol who's just angry and evil at the world, who wants to kick our butt and punch us in the face, as opposed to somebody who's not listening to their orders or not listening to them because they're experiencing a mental health crisis. They're incapable of understanding through oversensory in their mindset at that time, or a lapse of rational thinking through their thoughts, emotions, behaviors, or whatever that might be. So they're able to at least recognize. Now, obviously, we are required to have firearm training. We're required to have first responder medical training. You're required to have control and arrest tactics training. And this, in my opinion, goes right at the top. I mean, it supersedes a lot of training that we get, in my opinion. So we prioritize the importance, especially, unfortunately, after tragedies. Sometimes that's what prompts some of this. So hopefully we'll have more training, but I believe we're also going to have continuous training as well, not just certifying 40 hours of our officers in the academy, but also maybe 8 hours annually. Again, I'm only speaking for the Illinois State Police. I certainly hope other departments will follow suit or engage in that. I know I can speak, although I don't work for another city or county. I'm familiar with their training standards board. Um, they are creating throughout that Safety Act, they were required to create a 40-hour program. Now their officers do not have to take that 40 hours. They're required less than that, but that's available to them. And I think there are some encouragers out there for them to get involved with that. Also, there's legislation that was recently proposed to expand and try to get some therapy dogs specifically for mental health response throughout the state. So we know how productive that can be. But we're essentially training our officers that de-escalation is number one, just giving them a foundational understanding, just like any sort of medical. If we're not EMTs or we're not doctors by any means, we're not out there trying to diagnose or we want to stay in our lane, but we also want to make sure our officers are competent and able to recognize the mental health condition, on its face, and not assume, otherwise could get us in trouble. So that's our goal, is to do that in that manner, Jeanette.
Thank you. How does CIT training improve interactions between law enforcement and individuals with mental health conditions?
I think we're both able to communicate uh, our expectations and what really works. The whole authoritative, sit down, mentality. And I'm Sergeant Brian Masters with the Illinois State Police. Is great for a traffic stop when you want to maintain safety with cars passing at 70 miles an hour and to ensure that you're safe out there and effectively able to keep yourself and that individual and all parties safe, responding to a call when you have to arrest somebody and effectuate a use of force or anything of that nature. But in this particular example, I think it's important for us to know that, hey, look, this is a person, and this is a person with a brain injury, or whether it's a traumatic brain injury, or whether it's a brain injury or a brain health condition, such as depression. I'll give you an example. 20 years ago, we're required by our department to ask somebody arrested, number one, do they have any dependent personnel that would be affected by their arrest that we need to tend to or provide for? But secondly, do they have any medical conditions or any medications that we need to be aware of if they're going to jail? So I've had people, 20 years ago say, "Oh, I've got anxiety," and I just think, "Oh, okay, the person gets anxious, no big deal." But now you're probably thinking, "Dummy me," but I understand that anxiety, a generalized anxiety disorder, can be debilitating. It could prevent somebody from driving. It could prevent somebody, therefore, from even having a job. So we're educating our officers to understand these things, to understand not to get close to somebody that, that's going to be intimidating. We understand our uniform alone might be a scare presence. So introducing ourselves with our first name, just being personal, not raising our voice, having our expectations, met for safety. But at the same time, if the person can stand and they're not a threat to us, or if they can sit and they're not a threat to us, empowering them with a decision, so a lot of different things that may sound subtle and small would add up to a better interaction in our belief.
All right. What key skills are taught during the CIT officer training?
Yeah, so I hit on some of those, but the one thing that we definitely preach, it would be certainly asking the right questions, open-ended questions, allowing that person to talk, allowing them to vent, not interrupting them, because we're not going to get any information that way. And if we can relate to them and build trust and a connection, and provide them with what the outcome of this situation is going to look like. Again, empowering them with decision, comforting them, reminding them that, we don't have to have an ambulance respond here, lights and sirens, if that scares you, if those lights scare you, or if that causes you embarrassment or further enhances your anxiety at this point. If you're comfortable, we will do the transport ourselves if it's safe, or we don't have to put somebody in handcuffs if they don't need to be for that reason. We can tell them, we're not going to leave you, um, we'll just drop you off and say good luck. I mean, my shift doesn't end until 8 o'clock. I'm in no hurry here. Not only are we going to say that with words, we're going to show it through our actions. So a lot of these things and these tactics are deployed into this 40 hours and beyond. So we strive to get everybody educated just on that premise alone.
Okay. How does CIT training help officers recognize the signs of mental illness or a crisis situation?
Yeah, so like I say earlier, we definitely don't want to. We have enough responsibilities, you can imagine, but I understand all of you probably have equal responsibility, and I can't imagine being in your shoes, and I'm sure that's vice versa. So we don't want to get out of our lane. We understand that our goal here is to assist, and what we mean by that is we want to connect this person with treatment, treat them as a person and not a problem. And if we can make that connection, we also would understand that as the first responder or first person interacting, we're going to set them up for success or failure based on our interaction with them. I mean, I think when you think about going to an emergency room, just imagine how you're treated, whether it's a nurse that's rude or an ER doctor. Um, it's probably not going to set a good tone to encourage you to go get the medication and to go get the help and to reach out next time you're in need if you've got those poor responders in that front end. Even though we're not the experts, we're not the clinicians, we're not the deciding factor to detain this individual on a psychiatric evaluation. We're the first one that might connect them with the right people and give the right sales pitch, in a professional and you know, educational manner that will incite these people or encourage them to go get help.
Thank you. Can CIT training be integrated into ongoing law enforcement training, or is it a separate program?
Yeah, so I think our goal, being at the Division of Academy and Training for our agency, is that, we have a policy in place where we are required to have continuous training, and I think that's going to be enhanced. I think it's going to be broadened because not only are we requiring it for our officers who to graduate from the academy, but once we complete. Again, we've got approximately 1,800 officers on our agency alone, um, and we're well over halfway, probably around seven, I would guess seven-ish, 700 plus left to get certified. But it's come a substantial way to get to everybody that training. So yes, it will be something continuous. It will be something that will invite. People to submit annually mental health trainings, and I personally look forward to an opportunity, hopefully, to attend this year's NAMI conference. We want to get, if I can get there and share some information with my colleagues and get us involved, I would love to do that next year, the following year, even have more of us. But we want to have more training on this and from other agencies, from other people, from experts, like yourself and many others out there that we, clinicians, therapists, or social avenues to help us. Absolutely.
Thank you. How long does CIT training typically last, and what does the curriculum include?
Yeah, so it's a 40-hour curriculum. If anybody's ever heard of or um, watched, there's a video out there. It's called The Crisis Cops, Ernie and Joe, and they are former San Antonio, Texas police officers who started with their command a mental health unit, and they captivated the attention of area law enforcement in Texas, and soon after that even got national attention. And our program is specifically from them. So it was awesome that the 100 Club of Illinois provided us with funding, helped us get connected with that particular curriculum, and we had instructors that were on the ground roots with that and able to share that program with us to keep it going. And so it involves the introduction of mental illness, serious mental illness, having subject matter experts come in, talk about such things as personality disorders, certain things like developmental disorders, how to talk to particular juveniles or adolescents and how that might differ from adults, and also to come in and share with us state and local resources for mental health and provide our officers with those at minimum so they're aware of, oh my gosh, I don't remember anything out of the 40 hours, which hopefully is not the case, but at a minimum, they have programmed in their phone 988 and 211 and at least know their local mental health authority at minimum. And then we also go through scenarios um, where we have, actors that would portray psychosis, hallucinations, being of a suicidal ideology or ideation, so we can ask the right questions, specifically how to address asking someone, are they, wanting to kill themselves, and understanding that, hey, I'm not going to introduce that idea into their head if they weren't thinking of it. We know that's been proven a fact. So if we can really broaden these officers' horizon in terms of being open-minded and receptive, especially those that have been on a long time, and understanding that, these most of these individuals are not violent. I think if somebody, an officer, had a prior experience with an individual who had schizophrenia, who was violent, maybe in their own mind, they're going to have a little uneasiness, but we need to convey to them that the majority of these individuals are not violent. They're simply in need of help. And in my understanding, the majority of these, you would know better, but majority of these people are actually um, more likely to be victims of crimes as opposed to assailants. But again, we're not telling them to be punching bags, and we're not telling them to, let their officer safety down so they're getting injured. But we want to make sure that nobody gets injured, and to provide for these individuals that do require special needs and services.
Okay. What role do mental health professionals play in CIT training?
A big part. There's 5 blocks that they come in with, and that was the developmental disorders, the juvenile and adolescent, the personality disorders, um, the state and local resources, and we also have them come in and just make sure that we're all on board with our admissions for voluntary committal to ensure that we all understand the criteria. So let's say, obviously, if somebody is, suicidal, that's one thing. Um, if they're in the third criteria, unable to take care of themselves, that's one thing, right? They're not taking their medication, they're not eating, whatever the case may be. But if they're over here on that other side where they're threatening to harm somebody, or they have harmed somebody, not just instantly taking them to jail and locking them up, but maybe getting them into a mental health treatment if we can correlate that behavior is associated with a mental health crisis.
Okay, thank you for that.
So
How
you all
does
play a
CIT,
big part.
thank you. How does CIT training differ from traditional law enforcement training?
I can tell you just on the 20 years that I've had on, I mean, it's sad. It's kind of embarrassing for me to sit here and say this, and I can't imagine what it was like 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But I've watched videos, I've seen people come in and talk, and it's actually scary. I mean, even when you look at, the state institutions that we had in Illinois, and the treatment that we were
Mm.
doing to these individuals, and the testing manners and procedures, and the judgments, and the stereotypes, and thank God we're getting away from a lot of that, uh, you know, stigma. I know it's still out there, unfortunately, but from my perspective personally, the days of us receiving a call of basically this store owner, wants this individual removed. All right, you're coming with me. You're going to do it. I'm going to tell you to do it. If you don't do it, we're going to make you do it. And let's go. I ain't got time to hear you out. I got to get to the next call. Hopefully, those days are long gone. Where we're able to look at this person as a person, and really leave that situation knowing. And I always tell this in my classes. And again, I know that I can't, spread my word to everybody from every other agency, but certainly our own personnel. Look, if this person was your family member, would you just take them to a random gas station with no phone, or no, they're not even open, and hey, I got them out of the county line away from the problem, no longer my worry, and whatever, that's not acceptable in my opinion. We've seen that go south too many times on videos and different things throughout the nation. So our goal is to have these individuals treat that person as if they were a family member, a loved one, and not do anything different than they would have had it been just that.
That is amazing. That is such a difference from the past. What challenges might officers face when responding to calls involving individuals in mental health crises?
I think anytime somebody hears the term schizophrenia, or paranoia, or anything of that nature, there's an uneasiness. Or for instance, you're walking down the street and somebody's talking to themselves. You kind of look, and you're just like, okay, well, maybe you grab your little daughter or little son's hand, and you go to the other sidewalk or the other side of the street, or something, and it's not illegal to talk to yourself, right? It's not illegal to be homeless. It's not illegal to, be an emotional despair. And sometimes people just need a vent. They just need to talk. They just need to cry. They doesn't mean they're need to be locked up in jail. It doesn't need to mean that they need to be locked up for a period of time in a psychiatric institution. Um, Allowing us the ability to have officers uh, basically see from that first interception what it is they're actually dealing with is huge. It's instrumental in this training and really resorting back to what they're taught or what's instilled in them to enhance. So barriers I could see, oh my gosh, responding to a person who's upset and is having these voices in their heads. But let's go and let's have a conversation. Let's talk. I mean, what are these voices saying? Well, they're just saying that, I've got to climb a roof today. Okay, that's doable. We can work with that, right? Or as opposed to they're saying I've got to kill my mom or the next person that comes in this place, and unfortunately that's you. I mean, that's a different story, but we want to make sure we still are treating that, as a mental health crisis is what it is. But um, so I think when weapons are involved, obviously that's a little different story for us. But at the same time, there's a federal court case which is really big right now. Off the top of my head, I can't quote it to you, but I can get it to you later. But it's really looking at a lot of the action that takes place right before the use of deadly force. For instance, what did this officer do? Let's give a quick example of, there's a speeding car coming at that officer. Yes, that's deadly force. The car is going to hit me and run me over. That's a problem, right? But if I'm jumping in front of that car and pointing my gun at that car, is that wise? Is that a good decision to make? Me personally, no, it's not. I would rather get out of the way and live. I know that my gun is not going to, it might, if I'm lucky, I might get a shot in there and kill the driver, but I'm still going to die because the car's not going to stop in time, right? So, what are we doing to escalate a situation or put ourselves in a deadly force situation unnecessarily? And again, I'm not saying that all officers are wrong or they're not justified in their shootings or actions, but we want to do everything we possibly can to de-escalate a situation, avoid using force so we're not getting injured, so the public's not getting injured, and we're getting the person help is the number one goal. So there are obstacles out there, I think. But I think they're easily overcome with training, education, and just retreating. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, we're not going to retreat if a little child or a victim is, in imminent danger or harm. We're not going to say, well, all right, it's on, you have a good day. It's on your own. We're going to do what needs to be done and take care of business. But in situations where we've got time and we've got safety and we need to get a little bit more specialized training and help and aid, I mean, let's take our time and do that. If this person's alone, they're having a crisis, they're inside with a baseball bat, and they're not going to hurt anybody else, maybe we take a step outside and we reevaluate for a little bit. So a lot of things are being done with that.
Thank you. What are some success stories or positive outcomes from departments that have implemented CIT training?
So in our department alone, we've had a lot of individuals that have been helped. I remember, I'll share one quick story with you of this young lady who was homeless, and this is down by East St. Louis, and was living in a car with her two children. And she would intentionally sleep at different locations in which she thought there was video surveillance for the very fact of oh my God, if something bad happens, at least it'll be on video. So goes to show you the danger and the scare in her mind, rightfully
Yeah.
so, for her children and herself as she had to live through that despair and distress. But long story short, she would get a job later on at Burger King and was actually, taking food from the restaurant out to the car just to feed her kids. And somehow or another that got conveyed and shared with law enforcement. And our officers, would respond and not be like, oh, the first thing we're doing here is arrest you for theft of, that's not the goal here. We connected her with treatment. We were able to get her into a satisfactory situation and help her in that regard. So that officer's mentality, he had just recently went through CIT training, so I think he had a little more compassion, behind him at that point. So similar stories like that are out there. So that's good to see.
How can CIT training help reduce the use of force in situations involving individuals experiencing mental health crisis?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is if we're encountering somebody, and let's face it, if somebody is calling the police, usually they've tried everything to help themselves, or if somebody is calling on a loved one or somebody else, they may have already tried a lot of techniques that have failed or just not working that day. So we know we're not being called to be welcomed with warm hugs and hugs and kisses and just to give us a thank you. We understand that. So if we can understand that maybe, just maybe, this person might only have their humility or their dignity left, and we don't want to take that away, or we know they've got nothing to survive or live for, we can come in and treat them as a person and show them respect and come in with a calm voice, non-threatening behavior. We're matching it with our words. Um, and really, even though they may be upset or what have you, just stay and maintain that professionalism and calmness, and hope that continues with all those different things and tactics we talked about earlier, that we can have a better outcome and better success.
Thank you. What types of partnerships between law enforcement and mental health organizations are essential to the successful CIT program?
Well, in my opinion, we would fail without any outside education. So I love NAMI. I did not have any idea what NAMI was. I'd never heard of it a year and a half ago before I took this position. And we find that many of our officers don't know until they take this training. And I can't speak highly enough about NAMI and what you all have done and mean to us. Um, and I will say personally, the one I hear the most out of countless trainings is how important and beneficial the NAMI speakers, those who have a mental illness or serious mental illness, and or a loved one with those mental illness or serious mental illness, and or law enforcement interaction, having you come in personally, including yourself, Jeanette, or virtually joining our training, how influential that is when you make it personal. That is a huge benefit. So by far, that's the number one most beneficial in my opinion, but also working with the mental health professionals, whether that be clinicians that are out there operating shifts with police officers in a response in the same squad car or working in the same office. So without that support, help, and education, and having that resource, I think this would honestly, I don't think it would be nearly as successful. And it kind of infringes upon you guys are the scholars, even though we may be the first to respond, or we might be who 911 sends. We understand that you guys are the ultimate authority and the ones that need the support from us on the ground to get these people into treatment. So you guys are huge.
Thank you for that. I just have time for one more question. What steps can be taken to encourage more law enforcement agencies to implement CIT programs?
So I think the Safety Act helped. I think by the Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board, they're often referred to as ILETSP, the creation of this 40 hours to at least offer departments. So let's say a department had like 40 or 50 officers. Um, those officers might only receive 8 hours of annual CIT training outside the state police because we require 40, but I'm talking city and county agencies, which is the majority of police in Illinois. Um, they may only receive that 8 hours. At least now there's a 40-hour class. So let's say you have a really good drug enforcement officer out there. He's really good at drug interdiction. He's going to go to a lot more training for drug interdiction than I am. Or let's say I'm the greatest DUI detector out there and I'm arresting numerous individuals for driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. I'm going to be going to a lot more training because that's self-initiated. I want to enhance. I want to get better. Let's say we got somebody whose grandfather, I literally yesterday, I left our academy. We have a class of 32. Well, there's more than that, but the class I was in, 32 cadets that'll graduate next week. And one of these cadets came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I would love to become a CIT instructor when I graduate or when I get out there." And it's personal for me because my grandfather, was suicidal and grabbed a gun and was going to use it on an officer that knew him and explained how this officer knew the gentleman, remained calm and recognized this wasn't, I don't remember the grandfather's name, but it wasn't Jack. This was somebody else on that particular day, and didn't shoot him instantly, and could have lawfully. But having that personal, connotation to it makes it so meaningful. I apologize, I got on a tangent. I hope I answered that last question, Jeanette, but
Yes,
um,
you did.
yeah.
Thank you. I saw a hand, Orintho Ferris. Did you have a question?
Actually, he had a question that he had put in the chat earlier. Uh, I don't know if you saw it, Jeanette. The question he put in earlier was, do the Illinois State Police respond to a lot of mental health calls?
Yeah, that was my question.
That's a great question, Mr. Ferris. That is a wonderful question. And so we used to have 22 state police districts in the entire state. Um, we've consolidated into what we now call troops. So the entire state of Illinois has 10 different troops. Uh, Chicago is one in and of itself. And so the rest are comprised of several counties within that troop. And depending on the populations, in particular counties. There are some cities and counties that don't have 24-hour coverage. So the answer was yes. We do have several counties in which the Illinois State Police would be the primary police jurisdiction responding to calls for service. Um, Obviously, in Chicago, no, the state police would not be the number one calls for service at residences. However, yes, if that individual was on a crash scene, or if that individual was at a rest area or state of Illinois property, perhaps we might very well be the first to respond. So, yes, but not near as many calls for service, because we're not always taking those initial ones that the city and county would get.
Okay, you already answered my follow-up question too. So yeah, because I'm kind of familiar with the Illinois State Police. I'm an aspiring police officer. I'm currently active duty in the Air Force, and I'm
Wonderful.
a military police officer here. So I saw this training on Facebook and I was like, let me get into this and see what it's about because I feel like us as military Leos, we kind of need this training as well and to see about that. But I'll be separating here in about 2 months, so well, 2 weeks actually, and be back in Illinois. I'm currently in a few hiring processes now, and thought this will help build my resume and repertoire to kind of see what the population is and the current stigma is going on in the area in the state.
Well, I tell you, I would love to share my contact information with you. Anything I can do to answer any questions along the way or help you along that journey, and we'd love to have you as well in our force. I don't know where you want to ultimately go, but yeah, that's awesome, and congratulations, and thank you for what you do. I appreciate the question. It was very good.
Okay,
Sergeant
well, I know.
Masters, would you like to put that information in the chat?
I sure will.
Thank you.
Definitely, I'll
Well,
do
we
that.
are at time. I do see one more hand. If nobody minds, I will allow this last question from Leah Morris. You're muted.
Hi. Okay. I work in the living room, as I asked with my earlier question. Living room standards now have gone 24/7, 365. So they should be open at least every day for 24 hours. Um, and I'll ask just one of my shorter ones. Um, how much of this is going to be included as like substance use, and where the substance use is what causes the mental health, not just the mental health causing the substance use? And then how much of this also goes hand in hand with the homeless that are, needing that little bit of extra because they're homeless, because they're schizophrenic, or their aggression is beyond what a normal person can handle.
Yeah, so those are both obviously very good questions. Just want to make sure I understand the first one. For the substance abuse, are you referring to what particular training that we're providing our officers during our CIT training if it is,
Yeah.
I'll say we have a specific block of a drug block. And so we introduce what drug-induced psychosis might be, or what it might mirror or image or look like. We've actually been very fortunate to have a young lady that works for Illinois Recovery come in and speak to our officers on multiple occasions. And at our academy, she herself, was into a lot of narcotics and comorbidity and factors here because of separate mental illness. But we all know that those sometimes go hand in hand, and presented, what that looks like. And so we understand we are very thankful to have some local health professionals come in on our last day and share with us the local and state resources available, which would also include some narcotics hotlines and information. But we all know that these individuals, sometimes are not welcome in certain homes because of their drug use or maybe their violence, as you alluded to. Um, so that could be problematic, or even somebody who is homeless that we just talked about that needs, mental health treatment. Are they getting it in the place that they're in? I'm not sure what jurisdiction you're in, but for our officers on the ground, we are trying to get that 211. I'm sure you're aware of it, but it's a 24/7 hotline in Illinois that our officers can call, and they'll help us try to get that person into the right homeless shelter, or get them a bus ticket, a bus fare, or emergency food, or emergency shelter. And then we can do some follow-up. But those are some maybe baby steps on our end that we're doing. If I didn't answer your question, I'd be more than happy to do it.
It's Winnebago County. It's northern Illinois, so I'm not exactly sure what area it is myself, but
Okay.
I we do get a lot of the CCRT coming in, bringing people in for us to speak with. And then we also have another group, it's called Mobile Crisis Response, that revolves around the CARES line. So I was just kind of curious because I didn't really hear very much about the substance use and the homeless, so that's kind of why I was curious about that. But yeah, I will definitely email you the rest of my questions.
Yeah, and most definitely do that. That'd be awesome. And just know that, yeah, we definitely respect that some people choose to be homeless and want to be. So we're not going to be out there, that number one priority for us is to go interrupt that by any means. But if we're called to a situation where now this person, the other day I was involved with an individual camping on state of Illinois Department of Transportation property. Now they had to have him removed. They asked us to do it. We went out there and we spent hours trying to find this individual because he did have alcohol, substance abuse problems, and getting the right screening and connections, because the first couple weren't willing to accept. So we're able to spend the time and have the resource knowledge. At least if we don't know the answer, we know who to call. And if we could get our officers on board to do that instead of just kicking them down the street for somebody else to deal with, that's not what we want. But
Well,
Well, I want
Sergeant
to
Masters, I wanted
respect
to,
everyone's time. Yeah. Go ahead,
yes,
Jeanette.
I wanted to thank you for all of your expertise, all of your wonderful answers. I learned a whole lot today because I never knew about the Premise Alert program. So I thank you for everything. And I also want to thank all of our participants, our listeners today. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to let Mr. Boykin close us out.
Yes, I just wanted to say that if anyone has any additional questions or would like to um, have more information, they can contact us at info@naminorthernillinois.org. That was the face of info@NAMI Northern Illinois, our executive director, Danielle
yeah, hello.
Angelari. So
Hello, Daniel.
thanks. Thanks everyone for your participation, and hopefully you'll be joining us for future Leading the Conversation webinars and coming up. Watch our website for more information. Thank you, Sergeant Masters. We appreciate
Thank
you
you
so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Okay.